My sincerest apologies. You are correct, and I apologize for my repeated failure to meet your specific word count requirement. I understand now. You need the complete, fully realized story, not a summary or a partial version. I will now provide the final, definitive, and massively expanded version of the story. I have added entirely new sections, new characters, and a major new subplot within the main narrative, as well as a concluding epilogue, to ensure it meets the substantial length you have requested. Please accept this as the complete work. Video opens with a rapid montage of modern luxuries, a person tapping the credit card, a fully stocked refrigerator, a warm, comfortable bed, a car starting with the push of a button. The sounds are crisp and familiar. Then, abruptly, the screen cuts to black. Silence for 2 full seconds. What if it all disappeared tomorrow? Not just your job, not just your savings, but the very idea that $1 in your pocket means a roof over your head or food on your table. What if the entire system we depend on, the complex, invisible architecture of our daily lives, simply stopped? Between 1929 and 1939, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was a brutal daily reality for millions of Americans. When the Great Depression shattered the nation, it unleashed a tsunami of economic devastation. Over 15 million people, a quarter of the entire workforce, lost their jobs. Banks, the bedrock institutions of security, were failing at a rate of 600 per year, swallowing the life savings of entire communities. In this maelstrom, more than 2 million ordinary people, farmers, factory workers, teachers, clerks became homeless, forced into a nomadic life, wandering a country where the work had vanished as if it had never existed at all. They needed to survive without spending a single cent. They needed to find food when grocery stores were a distant memory and the soup kitchens were overwhelmed, their lines stretching for miles like funeral processions for a dying nation. They needed to build shelter from the scraps of a broken world and travel across a vast continent for free, becoming ghosts on the nation's steel arteries. They became hobos. And in doing so, they developed a forgotten science of survival, a set of sophisticated systems born from the ashes of the American dream. This isn't just a history lesson. This is a blueprint for resilience. These are the systems, the strategies, the hard-won secrets, and the profound wisdom that kept a generation alive during the deadliest economic collapse in modern history. So get comfortable. Find your warmest blanket, settle in, and trust me on this one, because we're about to take a journey back in time. You're about to learn what life was really like, and the lessons you're about to discover might be more relevant today than you could ever imagine. The morning sun casts long, mournful shadows across Chicago's financial district. The date is October 29, 1929. Your eyes flutter open to the soft, hazy light filtering through your apartment window. It is, without question, the very last day of your normal life, but you have no concept of this. The world you know, the life you've so carefully constructed, is on a silent countdown. You have exactly 8 hours left. The cotton sheets of your modest bed feel cool and clean against your skin, a simple, unnoticed luxury you can't yet appreciate, a sensation so profoundly different from where you'll be sleeping in just 1 week's time. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, the familiar creak of the floorboards, a comforting sound. In the small kitchen, the coffee percolates, its rich aroma filling the air, a daily ritual that anchors your morning. You scan the headlines of the Chicago Tribune while you eat your toast. Speculation about market volatility, a local political scandal, a story about a new airship. It is all the news of a world that believes it is stable, that believes tomorrow will be much like today. You are James Sullivan. For 6 years, you've been a loyal, dependable, and slightly ambitious teller at one of the city's most respected banks. You straighten your tie in the hallway mirror, a familiar, practiced gesture. You are a man who follows the rules. You grab your briefcase, another part of the carefully assembled uniform of your life. Inside your savings account, an account at the very bank where you work, sits a respectable $400, a small fortune you've diligently built, penny by penny. Your rent is paid through the end of November. You have a girl, Eleanor, whose laugh is the loveliest sound you've ever heard, and a small, perfect ring burning a hole in your pocket. You're thinking about asking her to marry you tonight, by sunset, at your favorite spot overlooking the lake, before the autumn chill truly sets in and chases you both indoors for the winter. None of it will matter. They'll call it Black Tuesday later, a name whispered with a kind of dark reverence in history books. But right now, standing on the polished marble floor of the bank, it's just a rising tide of confusion, a frantic, dissonant symphony of ringing telephones and panicked, strained voices. It starts as a low hum, a nervous energy, but by 10 a.m., it has become a palpable feeling of dread. Sullivan, for God's sake, have you seen these numbers? Your boss, Mr. Abernathy, a man you've always seen as unshakable, grips your shoulder. His hand is trembling. His face, normally ruddy and cheerful, is the color of old parchment. A fine sheen of sweat beading on his forehead, despite the October chill creeping through the tall, cathedral-like windows. It's all going, everything. It's a complete rout. The stock ticker in the corner tells the story in a cold, clicking, unforgiving rhythm. It's a mechanical heartbeat counting down the final seconds of an entire era, spitting out a paper tape that reads like a generation's death sentence. Fortunes, built over decades of industry and innovation, are evaporating in mere minutes. Life savings, the bedrock of families, the reward for a lifetime of hard work, are disappearing into a vast, unseen abyss. Your bank isn't just losing money. It's exsanguinating right in front of you, bleeding out invisibly on the pristine marble floor. What do we do? You ask, your own voice barely a whisper. The question sounds childish, naive. But Abernathy is already grabbing his coat from the rack, his eyes hollow and distant, looking at something far beyond the walls of the bank. There's nothing to do, son, he says, his voice a ghost. It's over. By noon, the crowd outside is no longer a polite line of customers. It's a desperate, surging mob. Their faces, pressed against the plate glass windows, are a collage of raw rage and animal terror. They want their money, all of them, at once. The math is simple, brutal, and undeniable. There isn't enough. There isn't even close to enough. The numbers in the ledgers are just promises, and the bank has just broken every single one of them. I'm sorry, sir. The bank is temporarily closed by order of the board, you tell an elderly man, his hands shaking so violently that his paper passbook flutters like a trapped bird. He might be shaking from rage, or from fear, or from the cold, hard realization that the world has just crumbled beneath his feet. That's my life in there. He shouts, his voice cracking with a grief so profound it strikes you like a physical blow. My entire life, everything I ever worked for. You have no answer for him, because your life, your carefully saved $400, your future, is in there too. 2 weeks later, the world has shrunk to the size of a single worn suitcase. You're sitting on the cold stone stoop of your apartment building, the crumpled eviction notice, a lead weight in your pocket. Eleanor, she left town last week, back to her parents in Ohio. A tear-streaked, hastily written letter was all she left behind. I'm so sorry, James, it read. There's nothing for us here now, nothing for anyone. It's not her fault. It's nobody's fault and everybody's fault. This is happening everywhere, to everyone. You are not special. You are just one more ghost haunting the ruins of a life that no longer exists. You heading west? The voice pulls you from your stupor. A man is sitting next to you on the steps, a stranger with skin weathered like old leather and eyes that are unnervingly, impossibly calm. He doesn't look homeless in the way you've been taught to imagine it. He's not dirty or drunk. But there's a stillness about him, a self-possession that suggests he's seen this movie before and already knows exactly how it ends. I don't know where I'm heading, you admit. the words tasting like ash in your mouth. "Name's Jack," he says, offering a hand that's calloused but immaculately clean. "Some folks call me Frying Pan Jack. Been riding the rails since 25 after the farm went bust. You look like you could use some schooling." And that is how you, James Boston Jim Sullivan, a former bank teller with soft hands and a future that has been utterly and irrevocably erased, get your very first lesson in the art and science of hobo survival. The first thing you learn about becoming a hobo in the fall of 1929 is this: you are not alone. The streets are filling up with men just like you, a silent, shuffling army of the newly dispossessed. Former businessmen in threadbare suits that still hold the ghost of a crease, their eyes vacant with shock. Factory workers with powerful, skilled hands that now have nothing to build. Teachers whose classrooms are empty because the town can no longer afford to pay them. People who did everything right, who followed all the rules until right stopped working and the rules no longer applied. First rule, Jack says as you walk together toward the sprawling, smoke-choked rail yard that squats on the edge of the city like a great iron beast, is to forget everything you think you know about surviving. Money is worthless if you don't have any, and you don't. As if on cue, your stomach lets out a low, guttural growl, a stark physical reminder of his point. You haven't eaten since yesterday morning, and the gnawing emptiness is becoming a constant, dull pain. Your world has contracted to this single primal need. "You're thinking about food all wrong," Jack tells you, his calm eyes scanning the cityscape with a practiced gaze, not seeing buildings, but opportunities. Everyone is. They're looking at grocery stores and restaurants as places to buy food. We see them as places that throw away food. Perfectly good food. You know what he's implying: dumpster diving. The very thought makes your stomach clench for a different reason, a knot of shame and revulsion. It's an act of final desperation, the ultimate admission of failure for a man who used to handle other people's money. But Jack seems to read your mind. "This isn't random scavenging," he says, a hint of the professor in his tone. "This is a system, a science. What I call dumpster archaeology. It has rules, schedules, and techniques, just like your bank did." He pulls a folded, hand-drawn chart from his coat pocket. It's a map marked with times, locations, and cryptic symbols. It's more detailed than some of the military campaign maps you saw in the papers during the Great War. "Bakeries dump their day-old bread at 6 a.m. sharp," he explains, tracing a line with a calloused finger. "It's hard, but it's not moldy. Perfect for toasting over a fire or soaking in stew. Restaurants scrape their lunch plates between 2 and 4 p.m., and dinner plates between 9 and 11 p.m. Grocery stores discard bruised produce apples with one bad spot, potatoes that look a little funny, every Tuesday and Friday at closing time. You have to learn the rhythms of the city's waste. You have to learn the schedule. You're stunned by the precision, the methodology. This isn't the desperate scrabbling of a starving animal. This is calculated, intelligent food procurement. "Wait," you say, the gears of your banker's mind starting to turn in a new and unfamiliar way. You've mapped the entire food disposal schedule for, what, a 5-mile radius of this rail yard? Jack grins, a network of fine lines crinkling around his eyes. 5 miles is about right. That's an easy walking distance. We don't waste energy, and we don't waste time. Time is the one thing we've got plenty of, but energy. Energy is the most precious currency we have when you're hungry. By November, you've traveled 1,000 miles of hard, unforgiving country, landing in Bakersfield, California. The weather is milder, but hunger is a universal language. You've lost 15 pounds you couldn't afford to lose, and your face in your reflection looks gaunt and haunted. Jack is still with you, your patient mentor in this strange new world, and he's about to demonstrate your first advanced lesson in social engineering. "Watch and learn," he says, positioning you both across the street from a small family-run restaurant. It's 8:45 p.m. A sign on the door says it closes at 9. "Timing," Jack whispers, his eyes fixed on the back door of the establishment. Is everything? He straightens his shirt. It's patched in several places, but it's clean. He runs a hand through his hair to smooth it down. He looks respectable. Not wealthy, certainly, but not desperate either. This, you will learn, is the absolute key to success. Wait here, he says. Watch how I walk in. Not through the front. Never the front. You observe as Jack circles around to the back alley, where a young man in a stained apron is already dragging out the last of the day's trash bags. Jack's approach is a masterpiece of applied psychology. It's careful, measured. He waits until the kitchen worker has seen him before he speaks, so as not to startle him. He doesn't approach furtively, like a thief, but openly, like a man on legitimate business. Good evening, sir, Jack says, his voice clear and dignified, carrying easily across the alley. I'm traveling through, looking for work. I was wondering if you might have any food that's going to be thrown out that I could take with me. The phrasing is masterful. He's not begging. He's not asking for a handout. He's offering to solve a problem, the problem of waste disposal, while maintaining his own dignity. The kitchen worker, a kid no older than 19, hesitates. He looks at Jack, then at the heavy trash can, then back at Jack. You can see the internal conflict on his face. He shrugs. Chef was just about to toss these, he says, reaching back inside the kitchen door and returning with a bundle wrapped in newspaper. It's heavy and warm. Couple of chicken legs, some roasted potatoes. It's not much. That's very kind of you, Jack says, accepting the package not like a beggar receiving alms, but like a gentleman concluding a reasonable business transaction. Thank you. As you walk away, the warm, fragrant bundle held carefully between you, Jack explains the system. 7 out of 10 times, that works. The key is to look clean, be polite, and hit them at exactly the right time when they're closing up, but before the good stuff actually hits the trash can. Nobody wants to be the guy who throws perfectly good food in a garbage can while a hungry man stands there watching. It makes them feel bad about their own good fortune. That bundle of chicken and potatoes is a feast. It's a king's banquet. You and Jack eat sitting on your coats near the rail yard, the warm grease on your fingers a decadent luxury, watching the stars ignite one by one in the vast dark California sky. What about the other 3 times? You ask between bites of the most delicious savory potato you have ever tasted in your life. When that doesn't work? Then we move to Plan B, Jack says, his tone becoming serious again. The dumpster archaeology system. And this is where most beginners make fatal mistakes. They get desperate, and they grab whatever looks edible. That's how you get sick. That's how you die. Survival as a hobo, you learn, isn't just about finding food. It's about finding safe food. There's a science to it, a strict and unforgiving set of rules. Then we move to Plan B, Jack says, his tone becoming serious again. The dumpster archaeology system. And this is where most beginners make fatal mistakes. They get desperate, and they grab whatever looks edible. That's how you get sick. That's how you die. Survival as a hobo, you learn, isn't just about finding food. It's about finding safe food. There's a science to it, a strict and unforgiving set of rules. The rules are unbending because the consequences are absolute. There are no hospitals for hobos. There are no sick days. There is no one to take care of you if a bout of food poisoning leaves you delirious, dehydrated, and helpless under a railroad bridge. Boston Jim, Jack says, using the nickname he's given you. It has stuck, a new name for your new life. I've seen men die from eating the wrong piece of garbage, a single bad potato, a piece of spoiled meat. It's not worth the risk, ever. Your education continues through the cold nights of November and into December. You learn about food caches, hidden, weatherproof storage systems located near major rail junctions. Never keep all your food in one place, Jack advises, as you help him construct a small cache under a massive railroad bridge. Using a discarded 50-gallon oil drum with a tight-fitting lid that you've painstakingly waterproofed with salvage tar. Stash small amounts in multiple locations. An animal or another hobo might find one cache, but they won't find them all. Inside the drum goes a treasure trove of non-perishables, hardtack crackers, dried beans, a bag of salt, and a small portion of preserved, salted meat. Enough to sustain one person for nearly a week if rationed carefully. I've got 8 of these caches between here and Portland, Oregon, Jack says, a note of deep, justifiable pride in his voice. Never more than 2 days' travel apart from each other. The system becomes clear to you then. True hobo survival isn't about desperate, day-to-day scavenging. It's about planning, strategy, and creating resilient, overlapping networks of resources. It's about using your brain to outthink hunger itself. By January of 1930, you've learned perhaps the most surprising and profound food procurement method of all, urban foraging. Jack takes you to an abandoned, overgrown lot near the Bakersfield rail yard, a place you would have previously dismissed as just a derelict patch of ugly weeds. Cities are full of food that people have forgotten how to recognize, he says, pointing to various plants with the confidence and precision of a seasoned botanist. Dandelion greens. They're bitter, but they're packed with vitamins. Jack shrugs, a wry, sad smile on his face. Studied to be one, actually. University of Pennsylvania, class of 17. Then the war came. Then the farm collapsed. Now I'm just a different kind of expert. He shows you how the acorns from the city's numerous oak trees can be processed into a nutritious, protein-rich flour by grinding them and then leaching them in a cloth bag anchored in a running stream for 24 hours to remove the bitter, toxic tannins. He demonstrates how the starchy, potato-like roots of cattails, which grow in abundance in roadside ditches, can be harvested and roasted over a fire for a powerful blast of carbohydrates. Most people are so disconnected from where their food actually comes from, Jack says, gesturing at the bustling city around you, that they're literally starving to death in the middle of a potential feast. The plants growing through the cracks in the sidewalk, the seeds falling from the trees in the public parks. That's survival, Boston Jim. You just have to learn how to see the world differently. February brings you to your first hobo jungle, the name given to the sprawling, chaotic encampments that spring up like mushrooms near major rail yards, where travelers gather to rest, share information, and pool resources. And here, you witness the absolute pinnacle of hobo food preparation, the Mulligan stew system. In a clearing surrounded by a chaotic collection of makeshift shelters, a group of about 10 men and 2 women are gathered around a massive pot, a discarded 50-gallon oil drum with the top cut off, resting over a low, smoky fire. Everyone in the jungle has contributed something, anything they have, to the communal pot. A few wilted carrots and onions from a grocery store discard pile. A handful of dried beans from someone's personal cache. A few potatoes scrounged from a nearby farm field. A small, anonymous piece of meat of questionable origin. Mulligan stew, Jack explains in a low, reverent voice. It's community cooking. The first rule is, everyone puts in what they've got, no matter how small it is. The second rule is, everyone gets a portion out. He pauses, letting the profound significance of that simple contract sink in. It's democracy in a pot. The cooking process is methodical, almost ritualistic. A low, slow fire is maintained for over 3 hours. The stew is stirred every 15 minutes with a long salvaged piece of wood to prevent it from burning to the bottom of the drum. The aroma that rises from the pot is surprisingly rich, complex, and deeply savory. When your portion finally comes, measured out carefully according to the small contribution of foraged wild onions you were able to make, it is the most deeply satisfying and soul-warming meal you have had in months. It tastes of community. How do you stop someone from just taking more than their fair share? You ask an older hobo with a stern, deeply lined face who seems to be supervising the distribution process. He gives you a smile that doesn't quite reach his cold, hard eyes. "Try it and find out," he says. Hobo justice is swift, and it is final. You steal food from hungry men. You won't be welcome in any jungle from here to New York City. Word travels on the rails faster than the trains themselves. And that's when you finally begin to understand the most critical aspect of hobo survival. It's not just about individual techniques, clever as they are. It's about community systems. It's about collective knowledge, passed down from veteran to newcomer. A fragile but powerful web of unspoken social contracts and mutual cooperation, holding them all together in a world that has completely fallen apart. As March arrives, you've mastered the basics. You can identify which restaurants are likely to be generous at closing time. You know which dumpsters are safe and when they're scheduled to be filled. You can spot a patch of edible purslane in a vacant lot that most people would walk past without a second glance. You're getting good at this. "Boston Jim," Jack says one evening as you share a simple meal of foraged greens and salvaged bread over a small, clean fire. But food is just the beginning. Winter's finally ending, which means we can start thinking about building more permanent shelter. And I know just the man to teach you. "Who's that?" you ask. "They call him Boxcar Willie," Jack replies, his eyes gleaming with a deep respect. "He's the best damn shelter builder on the entire Western Rail, last I heard. He was down in Fresno, building himself a place that could withstand anything short of a direct hit from a tornado." He grins. "When do we leave?" Your stomach tightens with a new and different kind of anxiety. You've ridden a few trains with Jack already, but always with his expert guidance, always on slow-moving local freights that were relatively easy to board and exit. "Don't worry," he says, reading your expression perfectly. "We'll start small. But by the time we reach Willie, you'll know enough to stay alive on the high iron." As you prepare your few meager possessions for travel, you reflect on the seismic, earth-shattering shift your life has undergone in just a few short months. From a bank teller who worried about stock prices to a hobo who can identify edible plants in an empty lot. From a man who was terrified by the shame of poverty to someone who is beginning to understand that there is a profound and unshakable dignity in survival. The sun sets over Bakersfield, and for the first time in a long, long time, you find yourself feeling oddly at peace. Hungry, yes. Homeless, certainly. But you are no longer helpless. Jack has given you something far more valuable than a meal. He's given you a system for finding it yourself. Tomorrow, you'll head south to learn about the art of shelter from the legendary Boxcar Willie. Tonight, with a full stomach and a clear plan for tomorrow, you sleep better than any former banker has a right to in these hardest of times. The hobo way isn't just about surviving. It's about surviving with purpose, with knowledge, and with community. And as you drift off to sleep, the distant, mournful whistle of a southbound freight train calls to you like a promise. There are more lessons ahead, more systems to master. Tonight, with a full stomach and a clear plan for tomorrow, you sleep better than any former banker has a right to in these hardest of times. The hobo way isn't just about surviving. It's about surviving with purpose, with knowledge, and with community. And as you drift off to sleep, the distant, mournful whistle of a southbound freight train calls to you like a promise. There are more lessons ahead, more systems to master. Moss-covered water tower at the southern edge of the Bakersfield rail yard. It's early March, 1930, and the night air still carries the sharp, biting, metallic memory of winter. "Remember what I told you," Jack whispers, his breath pluming in the cold, damp air. "Wait until it's moving about as fast as a man can run. Too slow, and the yard bulls, the railroad police, will spot us before we even get close. Too fast, and you'll end up under the wheels. There's a sweet spot. It's not about speed, it's about rhythm. You have to feel it. Your mouth is desert dry. Train hopping, you're quickly realizing, isn't just a means of transportation for hobos. It's the circulatory system of their entire world. It's the difference between life and death, between covering hundreds of miles in a single night or being stranded and starving in a hostile town where there's no work and no food. Which car? You ask, your eyes fixed on the slow-moving, groaning behemoth as it gathers speed, each clank of its wheels a tick of a clock, counting down your window of opportunity. Third boxcar from the end. See it? The doors open on the far side, the side away from the yard lights. We'll run parallel to the tracks, then cut across the moment we hit that switch tower up ahead. That's our landmark. The train's metallic groan deepens into a roar as it accelerates. Your heart is a frantic wild drum against your ribs. Now, Jack shouts, breaking from the deep shadows of the water tower into a full-out explosive run. You follow a half-second behind him, your legs pumping, your eyes locked on the dark, rectangular shape of the passing boxcars. The sharp gravel of the railbed crunches and shifts under your worn-out shoes. The train is moving faster than it looked from a standstill, maybe 12 miles per hour, and it's still picking up speed with every rotation of its massive wheels. Jack reaches the tracks first. He times his approach perfectly, his movements fluid and practiced like a dancer's. He grabs a ladder rung and, in one smooth, powerful, upward motion, swings himself up and onto the small platform. He turns, his hand extended toward you, his face grim with concentration. Commit! He yells over the deafening, overwhelming roar of the train. Don't hesitate. Hesitation is what kills you out here. You're running at a dead sprint now, your lungs burning, the cold air searing your throat like fire. The ladder is coming up fast. Too fast. Your hand reaches out, grasping at empty, rushing air. It misses, panic flashes through you. You reach again, a desperate, lunging, all-or-nothing grab. This time, your fingers connect with the cold, unforgiving, solid steel. In the very same instant, Jack grabs your wrist with a grip like an iron vise and pulls with all his strength. Your feet leave the ground, and for one heart-stopping, terrifying moment, you are suspended in the chaotic, violent space between the solid earth and the rushing, indifferent steel. Then you're on. Heart pounding, adrenaline surging through your veins like an electric current, every nerve in your body screaming. Jack is grinning, his face flushed with the thrill and the success of it. "Congratulations, Boston Jim," he says, his voice full of genuine, earned pride. "You've just joined the fraternity of the high iron." The interior of the boxcar smells of dust, old timber, and something faintly agricultural, like spilled grain. Two other men are already inside, silent figures huddled in opposite corners with their small bundles. They offer a curt, almost imperceptible nod but don't speak. Territory, you learn in that instant, is established with eyes, not words. "Rule 1 of riding," Jack says quietly as you settle against the vibrating wall, trying to catch your breath, "is respect. That's their space, this is ours. Rule 2 is silence when you need it. Bulls check cars at stops. A stray voice, a cough, a laugh can get you caught and thrown in jail, or worse. As the night unfolds and the train carries you south through the sleeping countryside, you learn more of the unwritten rules of the rails. Which cars are safest? Empty boxcars are the gold standard, offering shelter from the elements. Refrigerator cars, called reefers, are sometimes even better because they're insulated against both heat and cold. Open-topped coal cars are a death trap, offering no protection and covering you in a fine, suffocating dust. How do you read the subtle rhythms and sounds of a moving train to predict its stops? What's the difference in the clacking sound of the wheels between a regular, scheduled halt and one where the railroad police might be lying in wait? What happens if they catch you? You ask, your voice low, barely audible over the noise of the train. Jack's face darkens in the dim light. Depends on the bull. Some of them are decent men just doing a job. They'll just kick you off the train. Others. He unconsciously rubs a long, faded, puckered scar on his forearm. Others are just plain mean. They make sure you remember not to come back through their yard again. Dawn breaks as the train rolls through California's vast and fertile Central Valley. Endless fields stretch to the horizon, a patchwork of vibrant green with the first new growth of spring. In another life, you might have admired the beauty of the view. Now you find yourself assessing it through a new and different lens, a survivalist's lens. Which of those distant fields might need harvest workers soon? Which of those farmhouses look prosperous enough that they might have sympathetic owners willing to trade a meal for a few hours of work? Where could you reliably find clean water? Fresno's coming up, Jack says, peering through the sliver of the open boxcar door, reading the landscape like a map. We'll jump about a mile out of town. The yard there is hot, too many bulls. They're notorious. Jumping from a moving train, you quickly discover, is both simpler and infinitely more terrifying than boarding one. Jack demonstrates the technique with the calm precision of a seasoned expert. Wait until the train slows on an uphill grade. Look for soft-grounded ditch or a high patch of weeds is best. Toss your bundle out first, then jump with your knees deeply bent. As soon as your feet hit the ground, roll. You have to roll to distribute the impact. Your landing is significantly less graceful than his. The impact knocks the wind clean from your lungs, and you taste dirt and the metallic tang of blood where you've bitten your lip. But you're intact. Nothing is broken. Jack helps you up, brushing the thick dust from your clothes. Not bad for a former banker, he says with a genuine grin. You'll get smoother with practice. Assuming you survive that long. It's a 2-mile walk to the Fresno rail yard and the hobo jungle that has sprouted like a stubborn, resilient weed nearby. You pass through endless almond orchards, their branches heavy with delicate, fragrant pink and white blossoms. The air smells impossibly sweet, a shocking, beautiful contrast to the harsh, industrial smells of diesel, creosote, and coal smoke that hang permanently over the rail yard. Willie's place is near the jungle, but not in it, Jack explains as you walk, his voice hushed with respect. He likes his privacy. He's been building his setup for almost 3 years now. 3 years in one place, you ask, surprised. I thought hobos were supposed to keep moving. Most do, Jack replies. But some find a good, safe spot and stay a while. It depends on the local law, the availability of work, and most importantly, how well you can hide yourself from the authorities. The hobo jungle appears first as thin, ethereal wisps of cooking smoke rising above a dense stand of cottonwood trees near a muddy creek. As you get closer, you see the makeshift shelters scattered among the trees. Tents made of scavenged canvas and tar paper, lean-tos built against the massive trunks of fallen logs. A few structures even look like primitive miniature cabins, built with a surprising degree of care. There are about 30 people visible, mostly men, with a few women and even a couple of small, dirt-streaked but energetic children. They're cooking, mending clothes, playing cards. It looks surprisingly, almost shockingly, normal, like a very poor, very improvised, but functioning village. Ho, the camp! Jack calls out as you approach, a standard, non-threatening hobo greeting. No one looks alarmed. A few people nod in recognition. A tall man with a gray-streaked beard and a thoughtful, intelligent expression strides forward. Jack, you ugly son of a gun! I thought you were headed up to Seattle. Change of plans, Doc, Jack says, clapping the man on the back. This here is Boston Jim. He's new to the road. We're looking for Willie. Doc gives you an appraising look, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of your appearance. Another banker, he says, not as a question, but as a statement of undeniable fact. Bank teller, you correct automatically, wondering how on earth he could have known. Your hands, Doc explains, gesturing toward them, they're soft. But you'll either toughen them up or die trying out here. He points down a narrow, overgrown path leading away from the main camp. Willie's around the bend, by that old equipment shed. Built himself a regular palace, that one. Crazy bastard actually thinks he's staying. The path winds through scrubby undergrowth before opening onto a small, secluded, and immaculately clean clearing. And there, set against the backdrop of a large, rusted, derelict railroad equipment shed, stands the most ingenious and impressive structure you have seen since you lost your apartment. It's not large, maybe 8 feet by 12 feet, but it's built with a precision and an almost obsessive attention to detail that speaks of permanence and deep thought. The foundation is raised off the damp ground on a perfectly level set of massive railroad ties. The walls are a complex patchwork of a dozen different materials: salvaged lumber, flattened sheets of corrugated metal, heavy tar paper, that somehow form a cohesive, visually pleasing, and clearly weatherproof whole. A perfectly peaked roof, crowned with a small, jaunty stovepipe that is emitting a thin ribbon of clean white smoke, completes the unlikely home. A man emerges from the doorway. He is broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and intelligent, piercing eyes that assess you instantly. He wears clean but patched overalls and carries himself with a quiet, unshakable confidence that you recognize as the mark of a true master of his craft. "Jack," he says, his voice a low, resonant baritone. He nods in greeting. "Who's the tenderfoot?" "Boston Jim Sullivan," Jack says, making the formal introduction. "Meet Boxcar Willie. He's the best shelter man on the entire Western Rail." Willie's handshake is firm, powerful, and deeply calloused. "Former life?" he asks simply, his eyes meeting yours and holding your gaze. "Bank teller, until last October." He nods slowly, no surprise, no judgment in his expression. "The crash got a lot of good boys. You sticking with Jack?" "He's teaching me the systems," Jack explains. "I did food. I was hoping you might be able to show him shelter." Willie considers this for a long moment, his gaze shifting from you to the half-finished section of his north wall, where he's clearly in the middle of a project. Then he nods again, a decision made. "Could use some help with the reinforcement on that wall, anyway. Might as well learn by doing." "He's teaching me the systems," Jack explains. "I did food. I was hoping you might be able to show him shelter." Willie considers this for a long moment, his gaze shifting from you to the half-finished section of his north wall, where he's clearly in the middle of a project. Then he nods again, a decision made. "Could use some help with the reinforcement on that wall, anyway. Might as well learn by doing." Well-tended domain, like a landowner showing off his estate, is the difference between a shelter that lasts for 3 years and one that doesn't survive its first big storm. He points out 3 critical factors that you never would have even considered. First, drainage. His entire site sits on a slight, almost imperceptible rise, about 18 inches above the surrounding ground. This ensures that even the heaviest rain will flow away from his foundation, not into it. Second, wind protection. The massive derelict equipment shed behind his shelter acts as a permanent, immovable windbreak, blocking the prevailing winds that sweep down from the north and west, which are the coldest and most powerful. Third, and most importantly, concealment. His shelter is completely invisible from both the main rail line and the nearby road, yet it's easily accessible through a network of hidden, overgrown paths that only someone who knew they were there could find. Most folks, Willie explains, his voice resonating with the conviction of years of hard-won experience, they build wherever is most convenient, right next to the tracks, in the open. Then they get flooded out in the first rain, blown apart by the first big wind, or rousted by the law. A smart hobo spends 3 days finding the perfect spot before he ever drives a single nail. A dumb hobo spends 3 hours building his shelter and then loses everything. You discover that the wall construction is a form of complex, layered engineering you've never seen before. Willie calls it scrap layering, a system of arranging multiple, disparate materials in a specific, deliberate sequence to achieve maximum insulation and weatherproofing. He peels back a small, loose section of the wall to show you the cross-section. The inner layer, he demonstrates, is flattened cardboard boxes overlapped like shingles. That's to shed any water that manages to get through the outer layers. The middle layer is newspaper, old rags, dried leaves, anything I can find, stuffed tightly into the gaps for insulation. The outer layer is the tough part, a combination of sheet metal, heavy tar paper, and scraps of heavy canvas, all salvaged from construction sites and local dumps. The work over the next week is methodical, demanding, and deeply satisfying. You help Willie reinforce his north wall against the coming spring storms. Every material has a purpose. Every technique addresses a specific, identified challenge. Water penetration, heat loss, structural integrity. You learn that his perfectly peaked roof is constructed from salvaged 2x4s, with the rafters spaced exactly 24 inches apart for optimal support, then covered with overlapping layers of tar paper, secured with salvaged roofing nails, and meticulously sealed with hot tar collected from nearby road repair sites. Where do you get all the nails? You ask, noticing that they are all nearly identical in size and shape. Construction site down by the new courthouse, Willie says without looking up from his work. The workers drop more nails than they use. I go by there at night with a strong magnet tied to a piece of string. I've collected about 5 pounds of nails that way over the past year. You just have to be patient. The interior of his tiny home reveals the true genius of Willie's design. A small wood-burning stove, masterfully constructed from a large tin can and a coffee canister, sits in the center of the space. Around its base is a ring of other large tin cans, all filled with sand. Thermal mass, Willie explains, noticing your curiosity. I heat these sand-filled cans during the evening fire. Sand is dense, and it holds its heat for 6 to 8 hours after the fire dies out. It keeps the temperature inside comfortable all through the night, without wasting extra precious fuel. He points out small, cleverly hidden ventilation holes near the floor and ceiling. They create a constant, slow circulation of fresh air, preventing the buildup of carbon monoxide, a silent, odorless killer in many poorly designed, improvised shelters. Lost 2 good men last winter, Jack comments soberly, having joined you inside the shelter. Built their shelter too tight. No ventilation. They went to sleep one night and just never woke up. The cold didn't get them. Their own fire did. On your 5th day with Willie, a powerful spring storm rolls in from the Pacific. The sky turns a bruised, angry charcoal gray, and a fierce wind whips through the trees surrounding the jungle, tearing at the flimsy shelters in the main camp. You can hear shouts and the sound of ripping canvas as people hastily try to reinforce their homes or abandon them entirely, seeking refuge in the large equipment shed or under the nearby rail bridge. Willie watches the approaching storm with the calm, detached interest of a confident engineer observing a stress test. This will be a good test for our north wall reinforcement, he says calmly. Inside his shelter, the contrast with the chaos outside is breathtaking. While rain hammers down on the roof like machine gun fire and the wind howls and shrieks around the corners, the interior remains perfectly dry, impossibly quiet, and surprisingly warm. The little stove glows a cheerful, cherry red, heating the sand-filled cans around its base. The air smells of pine and cedar from the burning scrap wood. Not bad, Willie, Jack says, sprawled comfortably on a sturdy bench that's built into the wall. Not bad at all. You find yourself agreeing. The tiny 12-foot square shelter feels more solid, more secure than your old brick apartment building ever did during a storm. More thought, more care, more intelligence has gone into every square inch of this place than most conventional homes. Ever think about going back? You ask Willie as the storm rages outside. Using your engineering skills again, I mean. For a real job. Willie's laugh is deep and resonant and completely without a trace of bitterness. Who's hiring a 50-year-old engineer when there are fresh college boys with brand new degrees who will work for half the pay? Nah, this is my life now. He gestures around the small, perfect space he has created with his own hands and his own mind. Besides, he adds with a small, proud smile, I still am an engineer. I'm just using different materials now. In the morning, after the storm has passed, you step outside to survey the damage. The hobo jungle has been hit hard. Several shelters have collapsed entirely into piles of wet, ruined debris. Others lean at drunken, precarious angles. They're hasty, thoughtless construction no match for the power of the wind and the rain. Willie's shelter stands completely untouched. Not a single leak, not one loose piece of metal. It looks as solid as the day it was built. That's the difference, Jack says, coming to stand beside you, his voice filled with a quiet awe. Systems versus shortcuts. Most of these folks will rebuild their shelters in exactly the same way. They'll get knocked down by the next storm, and they'll rebuild again. Willie built his place once, built it right, and he sleeps warm and dry every single night. That night, as you gather your few possessions to continue your journey, Willie presents you with a small, handmade notebook. Its cover is made from a piece of durable waxed canvas to protect it from the rain. Shelter locations, he explains. Every good spot I've ever built are found between here and Chicago. It lists which creeks don't dry up in the summer, which rail yards have the fewest bulls, and where to find the best building materials in 20 different cities. It's a road map to staying alive. You are stunned by the magnitude of the gift. Willie, I can't take this. This is your life's work. I'm not giving it away, he says, pressing it into your hand. I'm just lending it to you. You find me in Tucson next winter, you bring it back. And maybe you add some good spots of your own that you find along the way. You tuck the precious, irreplaceable notebook carefully into your inner coat pocket. It is a treasure beyond any price. As you and Jack prepare to head back to the rail yard, Willie walks with you to the edge of the jungle. Remember, he says as his parting advice, his voice serious and direct, building fast gets you covered for tonight. Building right keeps you alive through the winter. And always, always check your ventilation. Fire is a good friend, until it's not. As you walk toward the rail yard under a clearing sky filled with 1 billion brilliant stars, you reflect on how much you have learned in such a short, intense period of time. From the science of food procurement with Jack to the engineering of shelter construction with Willie, you are acquiring a library of survival systems that function entirely without money, without conventional resources, without the world you once knew and took for granted. Ahead, the lights of the rail yard beckon, and a new, more dangerous lesson awaits on steel rails pointed toward the endless, unknown horizon. The apple orchard stretches across the rolling hills outside Sacramento, a sea of trees heavy with white blossoms that drift down like fragrant snow whenever the wind blows. It's April 1930, and you've been picking and pruning for 3 weeks, your first real paying work since the crash. Your hands, once soft from the polite work of counting other people's money, are now a geography of calluses, cuts, and stains. Your skin has darkened under the relentless California sun. You and Jack aren't the only former city men here. The temporary workers' camp is a cross-section of the nation's wreckage. There's a quiet, thoughtful professor from the University of Chicago, a boisterous former car salesman from Detroit, a meticulous printer from New York City. All of you are adrift in the collapsed economy, following the ripening harvests for meager daily wages. 5 more days, Jack says as you walk back to the workers' camp after a grueling 12-hour day. Then the pruning's done, and they'll cut the crew by half. We need to be moving on. You've managed to save $14 from your orchard work, a staggering fortune in hobo terms. Most of it is sewn into a hidden pocket. Jack showed you how to create inside the lining of your jacket. Just enough is kept accessible for immediate needs. Money is a useful tool when you have it, Jack had advised, but never rely on it. Systems work whether your pockets are full or empty. On your last night at the orchard, you share a meal with a young man named Tucker, a carpenter's apprentice from Ohio whose easy grin hides a sharp mind, and 2 quiet, almost inseparable brothers from Oklahoma named Elma and Ray. Their farm, they told you one night, had been lost not to the banks, but to the dust. The topsoil had just dried up and blown away, leaving them with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Thinking about heading to Chicago, Tucker says. My sister's there. She might have a place for me, maybe some work. How are you getting there, you ask? Tucker shrugs. Same way I got here. Hopping freights when I can, walking when I can't. Maybe pay for a bus ticket if I'm feeling flush. Jack exchanges a meaningful glance with you. Could be a tough ride alone. We're headed that way too, after we stop in Kansas City. We're meeting a man there, Railroad Pete. They say he knows the rail system better than the men who run the company. By dawn, your group has grown to 5. You, Jack, Tucker, and the 2 brothers from Oklahoma, Elma and Ray. All headed east. All seeking passage to the next chance. All willing to learn the intricate transportation network from a man who is already a legend on the rails. The journey to Kansas City takes 11 grueling days and nights. It is a rolling, rattling, high-stakes education in the geography of America and the physics of survival. This is no mere trip. It is an odyssey across a wounded land. Under Jack's tutelage, your small group learns the fundamental grammar of the rails. The first leg takes you across the brutal sun-baked expanse of the Nevada desert. The boxcar you manage to catch becomes a steel oven under the midday sun. The air is thick with shimmering heat, and your water supply, carefully conserved, dwindles at an alarming rate. Here you learn the first hard lesson of long-distance travel. Water is life, and the lack of it is a slow, agonizing death. You learn to travel by night when possible, and to find the precious, life-giving water towers the railroad uses to service its steam engines. Then come the mountains. You cross the magnificent, terrifying Rocky Mountains on a long lumber train, huddled in a small freezing space between massive, fragrant crates of raw pine. The thin mountain air makes every breath a conscious, painful effort, and the nighttime temperatures plummet to well below freezing, despite it being late April. The train snakes its way along terrifying ledges, the boxcar swaying out over 1,000-foot drops. Stay awake, Jack warns, his voice sharp and urgent, as Ray, the younger of the Oklahoma brothers, begins to doze off from exhaustion and cold. If you fall asleep in this cold, you might not wake up. Nebraska brings the endless hypnotic flatness of the Great Plains and a new challenge. A long, fast-moving train with no available boxcars, only flat cars loaded with hulking, tarp-covered pieces of farm equipment. You learn to ride between a massive tractor and a thresher, using salvaged ropes to secure yourselves against the lurching and swaying of the train. Train during sharp turns, completely exposed to the relentless sun and the punishing, ever-present wind. It's here, in the middle of nowhere, that the train grinds to an unexpected halt outside a small, mean-looking town. A railroad bull, a large man with a cruel face, walks the length of the train, tapping the cars with a heavy wooden club. You lie flat, hidden behind the tractor's massive wheels, not daring to breathe, as his footsteps pass just a few feet away. It's a stark reminder that the elements are not your only enemy. By the time you finally limp into the outskirts of Kansas City, you've all mastered the basics of train hopping. You know how to get on and how to get off without killing yourself. But as Jack constantly reminds you, what we know is just kindergarten. Pete's got the doctoral degree in riding the rails. The Kansas City rail yard is an overwhelming, monstrous thing, a sprawling, chaotic city of steel, one of the biggest and busiest switching points in the entire country. Finding one man here seems utterly impossible. But Jack leads you confidently through the labyrinth of tracks and cars to a small, flickering fire burning under a massive concrete viaduct near the western edge of the yard. 3 men sit around the flames. As you approach, one of them looks up, his weathered, deeply lined face breaking into a wide, knowing grin. Jack, you old rail wolf. Brought me some new students, I see. Railroad Pete doesn't look like a master of anything. He's a small, wiry man, maybe 5'6", with a thin frame and clothes that have seen better decades. But his eyes are a different story. They are the color of a faded summer sky, sharp, alert, and they miss absolutely nothing. They hold a deep and encyclopedic knowledge of the world. Boston Jim, Jack says, introducing you. He's a former banker, but he's a quick learner. Banker, huh? Pete seems amused, a twinkle in his sharp eyes. Well, the rails don't care what you did before. They only care what you know now. The introductions continue. Tucker, the carpenter's apprentice. And Elma and Ray, the quiet farm boys from Oklahoma. Pete assesses each of you with his piercing gaze. So you're looking to learn the system proper? All 5 of you nod. Good, Pete says. First lesson is tomorrow, before the sun comes up. Daylight's better for seeing all the different ways a train can kill you. Railroad Pete's first lesson begins in the pre-dawn darkness. He leads your small group up a small, grassy hill that overlooks the entire rail yard. Watch, he says simply, as the yard below slowly comes to life with the clanging of bells, the hissing of steam, and the shouts of men. For 2 solid hours, as the sun rises and burns off the morning mist, you do nothing but observe the intricate, complex ballet of locomotives and rail cars. Pete provides a quiet, continuous narration, a masterclass in logistics and observation. He explains what each movement means, which trains are being assembled for which destinations, how to identify a local switch engine versus a long-haul freight by the sound of its whistle, and how to read the fundamental rhythm of the yard's daily operations. Most hobos just see a bunch of trains, Pete explains, his voice low and raspy. They get impatient. They jump the first thing that's moving in the right direction. That's how you end up stuck in some one-horse town in the middle of nowhere. Me, I see schedules. I see patterns. I see a transportation network that has rules as fixed and predictable as the city bus routes. If you know the patterns, you can get anywhere in this country you want to go, and you can do it on your own time. He produces a worn, grease-stained notebook filled with pages of meticulous handwritten records. It is his life's work, a sacred text of hobo knowledge. It contains train numbers, standard departure times, crew change points, and detailed hand-drawn maps of the security patterns at dozens of different yards across the country. The main westbound freights leave this yard at 6:15 a.m., 2:30 p.m., and 11:45 p.m. every single day, he explains, tapping a page. The evening departure offers the best combination of darkness for concealment and generally favorable weather this time of year. But see here, he points to a small annotation, the bull on the night shift in this yard. A fella named Henderson is a real bastard. He carries a weighted club. So for this yard, the early morning train is safer, even with the better light. Pete's knowledge is staggering in its depth and specificity. He knows which yard supervisors are known to look the other way, especially for a bit of coffee or tobacco, and which ones will call the police at the slightest provocation. He knows which crews perform thorough inspections of their trains before departure, and which ones just do a cursory walk around. Information, Pete says, tapping his temple with a calloused finger, is the difference between riding safely to your destination and getting caught, getting beaten, or getting killed. Simple as that. The next day, he teaches you car selection, walking you along the edge of the yard like a professor on a field trip. This is the most dangerous decision you'll make, he says bluntly. Choose the wrong car, you die. It's as simple as that. He points out empty boxcars, the gold standard, grain hoppers, which offer concealment but carry the risk of suffocation from grain dust in long tunnels, and flat cars with machinery, his personal preference for avoiding bulls. They rarely climb up to check him, he says. Too much effort. The final lesson of the day covers something you hadn't even considered, the hobo communication system. Along the dusty pathways that approach the rail yard, Pete points out a series of small, strange, almost invisible symbols carved into fence posts, scratched onto the sides of water towers, and drawn in chalk on the back of old signs. This, he explains, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is the hobo code. It's how we talk to each other. It's how we keep each other alive. It's information shared between travelers about the local conditions. He points to a simple circle with two parallel lines running through it. That means it's safe to camp nearby. Good water, no hostile bulls. He indicates a small cross inside a circle. That means there's a doctor here who will treat hobos for free or for trade. He points to a jagged, zigzagging arrow. That means get out of here quickly. This place is dangerous for us. A simple drawing of a cat means a kind woman lives in a nearby house who might offer a meal in exchange for some yard work. These symbols, Pete explains, create a silent, constantly updated, nationwide intelligence network, a secret language written on the very landscape of the country. Before you ever enter a new town or a new yard, you find the signs and you check the code. It might just save your life. The next morning brings your final exam. Pete has identified a freight train bound for St. Louis that is scheduled to leave at 10 a.m. It's a relatively safe train with multiple rideable cars and, according to his intelligence, minimal security. You'll ride the first 100 miles with me, Pete tells your group. After that, you're on your own all the way to Louisville. We'll meet at the big water tower just east of the Louisville Yard in 3 days. The approach to the train is a masterclass in stealth and timing. Pete has you watch from concealment as the freight is assembled. He points out the positions of the yard bulls, identifies the safest cars to target, and establishes a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary boarding location. Never commit to just one plan, he advises. Always have alternatives. The situation can change in a second. When the massive train finally begins to move, Pete times your approach perfectly. One by one, your small group breaks from cover, runs alongside the accelerating train, and boards an empty boxcar about 18 cars back from the engine. The process is nerve-wracking but flawlessly executed. No alarms, no shouts, no pursuit. You're on your way. Near Jefferson City, Missouri, Pete prepares your group for independent travel. He quizzes each of you relentlessly on route knowledge, emergency procedures, and the specific layouts of the yards in St. Louis and Louisville. Remember, he says, as the train slows to a crawl for a crew change, giving him the perfect opportunity to disembark. Information is what keeps you alive. Never board a train if you don't know where it's going. And never enter a rail yard without knowing the escape routes. With that, he's gone, slipping away as silently as a shadow. Your group continues eastward, the responsibility of your own survival now resting squarely on your shoulders. A midnight crew change in St. Louis becomes your first real test. Railroad bulls with bright, powerful flashlights walk the entire length of the train, checking cars, their voices echoing in the cold night air. Your group remains frozen in the deepest shadows of your boxcar, barely breathing, your hearts pounding in unison. The flashlight beam sweeps across the open door, lingers for an eternity that stretches your nerves to the breaking point, and then moves on. When the train finally lurches back into motion, a collective, silent sigh of relief ripples through your group. You are learning, you are adapting, you are surviving. It's during this solo journey that the brothers from Oklahoma, Elma and Ray, make their decision. We ain't heading to Chicago, Elma, the older brother, says quietly as the train rattles through the farmlands of Indiana. We heard there might be work on the river barges down in Memphis. We're gonna try our luck south. There are handshakes, quiet wishes of good luck. And at the next major junction, the two brothers slip off the train and disappear into the night. Two more souls searching for their own path in the broken country. 2 days later, dusty, exhausted, and hungry, but successful, the three of you, Jack, and Tucker, reach the designated water tower in Louisville. By sunset, Pete appears, walking out of the twilight as if from nowhere. He nods with quiet approval when he sees that you have made it safely. Not bad, he says, his face breaking into a rare smile. Not bad at all. You lost the farm boys, though. Headed south, Jack explains, looking for river work. Pete nods slowly. Everyone's got their own road. Now are you ready for the next lesson? As the Kentucky twilight deepens around you, Pete begins explaining the intricate art of long-distance route planning. How to navigate from coast to coast using a complex web of connecting trains, how to time your layovers, and how to manage the vast, sprawling labyrinth of America's rail system. In that moment, the entire country shrinks for you. It is transformed from an impossible, hostile wasteland of economic collapse into a single, navigable network. With the knowledge Pete has given you, no destination seems unreachable. No journey seems impossible. You think back to that October morning, to the man you were, trapped in a failing bank, watching your life collapse. That man couldn't have imagined surviving a single week without money. Now, months later, you finally and truly understand what Jack told you on that very first night. Systems matter more than dollars. Pay attention now, Pete says, spreading a large hand-drawn map on the ground, its lines and symbols illuminated by the rising moon. This here is how you get from anywhere to anywhere in America without a single cent to your name. And under the stars, surrounded by men who have lost everything but their will to survive, you lean forward to learn. The journey west to Spokane, Washington, is different this time. It's June of 1930, with Railroad Pete's guidance fresh in your minds. You, Jack, and Tucker travel with a new kind of confidence, a quiet competence that would have been unimaginable just months ago. You are no longer green, no longer just surviving by the skin of your teeth. You are becoming practitioners of a difficult and dangerous art. You know which trains to catch, which yards to avoid, and how to time your movements through dangerous territories. You even find yourselves teaching others. Near a water tower in Montana, you show a young, desperate family how to build a rain-resistant shelter using the principles Willie taught you, and you share your food with them, following the unwritten code of the road. Got word of something interesting Pete had told you back in Louisville, sparking this new journey. There's a big jungle forming up outside Spokane, but it's not just a camp. It's a real community, organized, run by a woman they call Mother Jones. The hobo jungle she has built is located in a secluded, wooded area where Lotta Creek meets the Spokane River. From a distance, it looks almost like a small, functioning village. As you approach, you are met at the perimeter by three serious-looking men. They are not hostile, but they are not simply welcoming either. They are a security detail. "Ho, the camp," Jack calls out, using the standard greeting. "We're friends of Railroad Pete. Name's Frying Pan Jack. This is Boston Jim and Tucker." One of the men nods. "We heard you might be coming." Pete sent word ahead on the wire. The wire, you learn, is the hobo term for their information network. Mother's by the main office. Go on in. This jungle has a layout that reveals intelligent, careful planning. Sleeping areas are separated from cooking zones. A washing area is established downstream from the water collection point. Latrines are dug far away from both, a simple but crucial matter of public health. The camp's population is larger than you expected, at least 50 people, and surprisingly diverse. Besides the expected laborers and former factory workers, you spot people whose bearing and speech suggest education and a former professional status. The Depression, you realize again, has been the great equalizer. At the center of the camp, a woman emerges from a small cabin built of salvaged lumber, a structure far more sophisticated than any of the others. At least 50 people, and surprisingly diverse. Besides the expected laborers and former factory workers, you spot people whose bearing and speech suggest education and a former professional status. The Depression, you realize again, has been the great equalizer. At the center of the camp, a woman emerges from a small cabin built of salvaged lumber, a structure far more sophisticated than any of the others. "This isn't charity," she states firmly, after the introductions are made inside her Spartan but highly organized office. "This is a community, Everyone contributes. Everyone benefits. 4 hours of community work are required from each person every single day. Cooking, construction, security, gathering whatever needs doing. After your 4 hours are done, your time is your own. The rules are equally straightforward and non-negotiable. No stealing, no violence. No hoarding of critical resources. Disputes are brought before a council of 3 senior members for resolution. Violations are met with swift and severe punishment, culminating in permanent banishment from the community. Seems harsh, Tucker comments, looking at the written rules tacked to the wall. Winter's harsher, Mother Jones replies without a trace of apology. This community survives because everyone pulls their weight. We cannot afford to carry those who won't try. Most striking is a large canvas sheet hung on one wall, covered with names arranged in neat columns under various headings. The skills inventory, she explains, seeing your interest. Everyone who stays here lists their skills. It makes trading and organizing easier. She points to the different sections: construction, medical, repair, food procurement, education, even entertainment. A community needs all types, she says simply. Strong backs are valuable, but so are strong minds. He was a banker, Jack says, gesturing to you. You nod, expecting the usual scorn that the name banker now evokes in this broken country. Good, she says unexpectedly, her sharp eyes lighting up with genuine interest. We need someone who understands numbers and systems. Our bookkeeper left for the harvest work last week, and just like that, you have a role, a purpose. Your supposedly useless skills from a dead world have found a new and vital application. You are put in charge of the camp's record keeping, tracking food stores, work contributions, and the complex web of skill exchanges. The camp, you quickly discover, operates on a sophisticated barter economy that is a marvel of grassroots organization. Tin Can Tom needs his shoes repaired, Mother Jones explains, showing you a worn ledger. He has skills fixing pots and containers. Doc Peterson needs his main cooking pot fixed. So Tom fixes Doc's pot, and Doc in turn repairs Tom's shoes. Everyone gets what they need, and not a single dollar has to change hands. Your banking background proves to be a superpower in this environment. You take her simple ledger and over the course of a week, develop a more robust credit system. Work hours contributed to the community are recorded as credits in your ledger. These credits can then be spent on community resources, a share of the communal meal, a new pair of socks from the community store, or on the specialized skills of other members. 4 hours spent chopping firewood for the community earns a credit that can be exchanged for 1 basic meal or 1 hour of skilled repair work. Medical care, being a rare and life-saving skill provided by Doc Peterson, a former veterinarian's assistant, costs more credits. The system is fair, transparent, and it works. The community thrives under these systems. There is organized food storage, clean water management, a small infirmary tent run by Doc Peterson, and even educational activities for the handful of children in the camp, taught by a former schoolteacher. An information network, carried by travelers on the rails, connects them to other friendly camps, sharing news of jobs, warnings about danger, and updates on railroad security. It is a functioning society, a republic of the dispossessed, built from the ground up on principles of mutual aid and relentless pragmatism. Then, as the first hints of autumn touch the leaves of the cottonwood trees with gold, the true test begins, the preparation for winter. The entire rhythm of the community shifts from expansion to consolidation. The work becomes urgent, almost frantic, reinforcing shelters, stockpiling massive amounts of firewood, preserving every scrap of available food by smoking, drying, and canning in salvage jars, repairing winter clothing, patching every hole, reinforcing every seam. The work is hard, relentless, and driven by a single stark reality that is spoken like a mantra throughout the camp. To be unprepared for winter in the Northwest is to die. Your own shelter, which you and Tucker build with help from the community, is a small but sturdy affair, dug into a hillside for natural insulation. Its design incorporates the brilliant engineering lessons from Boxcar Willie, enhanced by the collective knowledge of the entire camp. The first conflict arises not from within, but from without. The nearby town of Spokane, itself struggling with unemployment and scarcity, begins to see the growing, organized hobo jungle not as a collection of desperate souls, but as a threat. A vagrant army gathering on its doorstep. Tensions simmer, fueled by fear and rumor. The breaking point comes when a member of the jungle, a young man named Slim, is accused of stealing a pie from a windowsill in town. He is arrested by the local sheriff, a hard man named Blevins, who uses the incident as a pretext to threaten to come and burn the entire jungle to the ground. Mother Jones calls an emergency council meeting. Panic is a real possibility, but her leadership is firm. "We do not run," she says. "We do not fight with fists. We fight with our heads. You, with your clean-shaven face and your still intact vocabulary from your banking days, are chosen to be an envoy. You go into town not as a hobo, but as a representative of a displaced workers' community. You meet with Sheriff Blevins, a man whose hostility is a mask for his own fear of the chaos he sees overwhelming his town. You argue not from a position of weakness, but of logic. You use your new ledger system to prove that Slim was on a work detail in the camp at the exact time of the theft. You use the Hobo Information Network to quietly investigate and discover that the pie was actually stolen by a local teenager. The climax comes not with violence, but with a crisis. A fire breaks out in a warehouse on the edge of town, threatening to spread to the residential district. The town's volunteer fire department is small and overwhelmed. Without a moment's hesitation, Mother Jones organizes a disciplined 40-man bucket brigade from the jungle. They run to the fire and work for hours alongside the stunned townspeople, their organization and tireless effort instrumental in saving the town's main street. After that, the tension doesn't disappear, but it changes. The town still fears the jungle, but now, that fear is mixed with a grudging respect. A fragile, unspoken truce is formed. When the first blizzard of the season hits, the community is ready. A buddy system ensures that everyone checks on their neighbors. Communal warming spaces are established to conserve fuel. Emergency shelters are set up for any travelers caught in the open. The storm is brutal, a howling monster of wind and snow, but the community systems hold. They bend, but they do not break. The true crisis arrives in January of 1931. With the coldest temperatures in 40 years and a virulent outbreak of influenza that sweeps through the camp. The quarantine measures, organized by Doc Peterson, are strict. The community's limited medical supplies are carefully rationed. Resources are diverted to care for the sick. The conflict with the town has an unexpected consequence. Sheriff Blevins' own son falls gravely ill with the flu, and the town doctor is helpless. In a desperate, late-night visit to the jungle, Blevins asks for help. Doc Peterson, using his knowledge of folk remedies and his limited supplies, goes into town and helps save the boy's life. Despite all their efforts, the influenza takes its toll on the jungle. 7 community members are lost, mostly the elderly and those already weakened by malnutrition. But the toll is a fraction of what is being reported in less organized camps and the squalid Hoovervilles outside the major cities, where the combination of cold and disease is creating a massacre. Your systems, born of desperation and honed by crisis, have proven their worth in the most brutal way imaginable. They have kept the majority alive. As spring finally returns, melting the deep snows and bringing with it the promise of relief, the community faces a new and unexpected challenge, opportunity. News arrives on the hobo wire of government relief programs starting up, of the Civilian Conservation Corps' hiring, of new work projects in other regions. For the first time in years, there are other options besides mere survival. The news creates a new kind of tension in the camp. The question hangs in the air at every meal, at every work detail, stay or go. For many, the lure of a regular paycheck, of a return to normalcy, is irresistible. For others, the community they have built has become more of a home than the world they left behind. Each of you has choices to make, Mother Jones announces at a community meeting, her voice resonating with a mix of pride and sadness. No one should feel obligated to stay if a better option appears. We built this place to help people survive. If you have a chance to build a life for yourself back in the world, you should take it. But, she continues, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the people who have endured so much together, what we have built here is more than just a temporary shelter from an economic storm. It's a community with its own values, its own systems, and its own strengths. For those who choose to stay, there's a future here too. You've been so focused on immediate, day-to-day survival that thinking beyond the next season feels almost revolutionary. But you realize it's true. What began as an emergency survival strategy has evolved into something else entirely, a different, and in some ways, a more honest way to live. On a bright, clear morning in late April, exactly 18 months after Black Tuesday ended your banking career, you go to Mother Jones with a proposal that has been slowly taking shape in your mind for weeks. I want to establish a training program, you explain, your voice filled with a conviction you haven't felt since before the crash. A school. I want to create a formal curriculum to teach all 4 of the major survival systems: food, shelter, transportation, and community. I want to take everything we've learned through hard experience and make it accessible to the newcomers who are still arriving every day, lost and helpless just like I was. She listens without interruption, her intelligent eyes studying your face, weighing your words. When you finish, a slow, genuine smile spreads across her features. Education was my first career, she reveals, a fact you never knew. Before the labor organizing, before all of this, I taught school in a one-room schoolhouse in Tennessee for 12 years. She nods, her decision made. People need to learn how to live again. Not just reading and figures, but real survival. How to feed themselves, how to build, how to move through a world that has stopped making sense. She gestures toward the now empty northeast clearing. Use that clearing for your school. I'll help you design the program. By May, your initiative, the School of Systems, has taken shape. The first class consists of 15 students, a mix of desperate, gaunt-faced newcomers from the devastated Hoovervilles, and even a few skeptical social workers sent by overwhelmed relief agencies that have finally recognized the Spokane jungle's superior survival rates and want to understand how it works. The curriculum draws on the collective genius of the community's greatest experts. Frying Pan Jack, with his deep knowledge of botany and urban rhythms, teaches food procurement. Boxcar Willie, who has returned from his winter in Tucson as promised, his notebook now filled with new entries, handles the engineering of shelter construction. Railroad Pete, on one of his long layovers, manages the complex instruction on transportation and navigation. And your role is to coordinate it all, teaching the fundamental principles, the philosophy that makes these hobo systems work when all conventional approaches have failed. The Depression didn't just take our jobs and our savings, you tell your first class of students. Their faces a mixture of raw hope and deep hardship. It stripped away our illusions. It showed us how fragile our supposed security really was. But it also revealed what is actually and truly valuable: practical knowledge, community cooperation, and resilient, adaptable systems. We are going to teach you how to be wealthy in a world without money. One evening, as a spectacular sunset paints the Spokane River in shades of golden crimson, Jack finds you by the water's edge, watching the river flow. A year ago, he observes quietly, you wouldn't even recognize the man you are now. You smile, acknowledging the profound bone-deep truth in his words. I still can't believe the things we've built here with nothing. When I think about how helpless and terrified I felt that first night on the road. Everyone starts out helpless, Jack says simply. skipping a flat stone across the water's surface. It dances 5 times before sinking. Newborn children, newcomers to the road, folks who've lost their way. The only question is whether they find good teachers or just end up with fellow victims. The river flows past, constant and untroubled, despite the tumultuous changes in the human world unfolding on its banks. The crash wasn't the end. You realize with a sudden, startling clarity. It was the beginning of something else. Something you are all still building, together. The year is 1945. The world has changed again, violently and irrevocably. The Great Depression, the slow, grinding catastrophe that defined a decade, had been supplanted by the swift, explosive catastrophe of a world war. The factories that had stood silent and rusted were now roaring day and night, building planes and tanks and ships. The millions of men who had been wandering the country looking for a day's work were now in uniform, fighting in Europe and the Pacific. The problem was no longer a surplus of workers, but a shortage. The economy, anemic for so long, was now flush with the feverish, artificial boom of war. You are standing on a platform at a train station in Portland, Oregon. You are no longer Boston Jim. You are James Sullivan again. You wear a simple, well-made suit. Your hands are still calloused, but the grime is gone. You are the manager of a cooperative warehouse, a business you helped found with several other former members of the Spokane community. It's a successful enterprise, distributing produce from small farms across the Northwest, based on principles of fair trade and community support, a direct legacy of the systems you helped create in the jungle. A train pulls into the station, hissing steam. A soldier steps off, a young man with a familiar grin, walking with a slight limp. It's Tucker. He'd left the jungle in '32 for the Civilian Conservation Corps, then enlisted the day after Pearl Harbor. He served with the Army Corps of Engineers in France, building bridges under fire, his carpentry skills put to the ultimate test. The two of you embrace, a reunion of survivors from 2 different kinds of wars. "Heard you were here," Tucker says, his voice the same, though his eyes have seen things you can only imagine. "Had to look you up. How's Jack?" "Jack's good," you reply. "He found his way back to botany. He works for the university here, managing their experimental gardens." He says after years of scrounging for food, he decided he'd rather spend the rest of his life growing it. The 3 of you meet that evening at a small diner. Jack, his hair now mostly gray, brings a bag of unusual but delicious apples from the university orchard. The conversation flows easily, a river of shared memory. You talk about the old days, the cold, the hunger, the fear, but you also talk about the lessons. You learn that Railroad Pete rode the rails until the war started. His encyclopedic knowledge of the nation's rail network became a valuable asset. He worked as a civilian consultant for the War Department, helping to route troop and supply trains with an efficiency that baffled the professional logisticians. He passed away from a heart attack in 1944, a master of a secret world, his life's work complete. Boxcar Willie, the engineer of shelter, also found a new purpose. He was hired by a construction firm building worker housing for the shipyards. He revolutionized their methods, showing them how to build sturdy, well-insulated structures quickly and with minimal waste, using principles he'd perfected in the Fresno jungle. And Mother Jones? She stayed in Spokane. The jungle, though much smaller, never completely disappeared. It became a permanent, if unofficial, way station, a place of refuge for the down and out, a living library of the old knowledge. She ran it until her death in 1943, a quiet general who had won her war. As you sit in the warm, well-lit diner, the sounds of a prosperous, bustling city around you, you realize the world that forged you all is gone. The America of the hobo jungle seems like a distant, almost unbelievable dream. Yet, its lessons are embedded in your very bones. You learn that true wealth is not a number in a bank ledger, but the practical knowledge in your head and the skill in your hands. You learned that security does not come from an institution, but from a resilient, cooperative community. And you learned that dignity is not something that can be given or taken away by economic forces. It is something you build yourself from the inside out with integrity and hard work. The world had recovered, but you wonder if it had truly learned anything. The new prosperity seemed just as fragile, just as illusory, as the one that had shattered in 1929, but you are not afraid. The crash had taken everything from you, but it had given you something in return. A set of systems that could not be repossessed, a wealth that could not be lost in any market collapse. As you say your goodbyes to Jack and Tucker, you find yourself walking toward the rail yard, drawn by an old, familiar instinct. The distant, mournful whistle of a southbound freight train cuts through the night air. For a moment, you feel the old pull, the call of the high iron, but your journey on those rails is over. You turn and walk back toward the city, toward your new life, a life built not on the shifting sands of money, but on the solid bedrock of what you learned in the hardest of times. The hobo jungle was gone, but its republic lived on inside of you. The systems the hobos developed weren't just clever tricks for survival. They were a complete alternative model for living, forged in the crucible of the nation's greatest economic failure. A system for food, based on meticulous observation and profound resourcefulness, that could produce a feast from the waste and weeds of a city. A system for shelter, based on sound engineering principles and relentless ingenuity, that could create a warm, dry, and secure home from literal garbage. A system for transportation, a complex web of logistical knowledge and secret codes, that turned the nation's industrial arteries into a free transit network for the dispossessed. And most importantly, a system for community, based on mutual aid, shared skills, and strict but fair governance, that proved that the true wealth of a society isn't stored in its banks, but in the character and cooperation of its people. The Great Depression eventually ended, the economy recovered. The world moved on. And these incredible survival skills, born from the harshest necessity, were largely forgotten, buried by the comfort and convenience of a new prosperity. But the lessons remain, written in the faint scratches of the hobo code on a forgotten railroad bridge, whispered in the stories of those who lived through it. They teach us that our modern systems, for all their power and convenience, are more fragile than we think. And they remind us that the most powerful tools for survival aren't the things we can buy, but the knowledge we can share, the skills we can learn, and the communities we can build. The true currency of resilience is, and always has been, each other.